Why play Enforcers? Well, you can have an insane spot that you want to tempo the lobby with. You want to play a comp that caps very high, maybe one of the highest capping comps that exists right now in the current set of TFT. Or you have really solid AD melee items and you think that you want to play around some of the Enforcer units like Vi Caitlyn. However, this comp will be warned, this is one of the most high roll comps out there. It is very, very high roll. You cannot play it if you're losing. You cannot play it from behind very often. You need to have a lot of econ and a lot of HP a lot of the time. The bad spots for this comp are very bad. It is a very high chance you are going 8th if you do not hit the units that you need to hit. And it's also quite reliant on 5 costs and an emblem. A lot of times Enforcer only in its really high vertical trades actually does anything for your board. Now, who am I? I am this guy right here, Fenrir But Gaming. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you like my content. 90% of you aren't subscribed, but there's a lot of returning viewers, so please, if you're returning, you're watching a couple of my videos, make sure to drop a subscribe because that's helped me out as a small content creator. So, let's talk about Enforcers. So, we'll go through the trade itself, and then we'll talk about some of the stuff. I'm not a big Enforcer fan, but I do play Enforcers when I have a spot for it. I agree that it is one of the strongest comps, and I'll explain why, and I'll explain the shortcomings of it, and then we can have like a long-winded, like, going through the whole tutorial and figure it out. The first thing is, this is probably the most important thing that I want to show you guys. Some people really, like, I see a lot of chats and they don't know what it is. The Enforcer icon is from the mask in Arcane. That's where this comes from. It's not a little person, it's not like a guy squatting, it's the Arcane helmet. So that's the first order of business. Now that we're all on the same page, let's talk about the trait. So, Enforcers gain shield and damage amp. The highest health enemies become wanted. So there's a little wanted indicator that looks like a little target sign that appears on enemy units, and it's usually by the X amount of highest health units on the enemy board. When a wanted enemy dies, then Enforcers gain 30% attack speed. So basically, Enforcer as a trait is a more of a well-rounded trait. It's meant to be one of the common played vertical traits. It's one of like the main archetypes that you would want to play around TFT. Just like the way sets are designed, usually they have like these very large, many units fall under the same trait because it's very friendly to play around. So what you get is you get shielding based on HP, so it gives you some tankiness, and it gives you some damage amp. So it's very flexible to work with all of the units, and then additionally you get attack speed if a wanted enemy dies. So something that's really important is that the wanted deaths a lot of times can make or break the fight. The HP shield as well as the damage amp is quite good, don't get me wrong, it is very strong on certain units. However, the wanted deaths giving the attack speed, especially if you stack killing many wanted units, that's what really makes the fights go as either an instant win or an instant lose out. It makes this comp very, very high roll because getting the wanted deaths as well as having enough of a strong comp when playing deep into the Enforcer trait is what, like, it's very easy for things to just fall apart very fast and you just lose rounds by a lot of units because you're putting so much pressure on your damage dealers to actually get these kills in order to steamroll the fight. So, when should you play Enforcers? I try to avoid playing Enforcers unless I have an Enforcer emblem. Now, I will talk about it a lot later. You can play this comp without Enforcer crest or without getting an Enforcer emblem. It is possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. What I'm saying is it is very difficult and it's very high roll. However, you can also play it around AD melee items because the main carry that you're going to be playing is Vi. So you usually want to have Vi items first and foremost. It is a very bad idea to look at the Enforcer units and not itemize the main carry that you will have in your mid game in hopes of high rolling into a late game. We'll talk about that after. So typically I would avoid this comp, not if you have just general melee. If you have general AD, I would not necessarily say it's an Enforcer spot, but having really good melee like Sterix, Bloodthirster, those type of things, they're like tanky, strong frontline units, is really good for Vi, and then I would more lean towards this if I have that type of setup. Now, let's go through the problem. So, there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about because Enforcer is a deep trait. So I'm going to try my best to get through this as fast and as clear as possible. But I'm going to explain to you all the problems I've experienced playing Enforcer. Now, I have played Enforcer. I played it many, many times. I tried to limit the amount that I played because I do not have confidence in the trait. But that is besides the point. One of the main things with Enforcer is low level Enforcer or low into the trait Enforcer. There's a big problem with it. And this is something you might not notice, but hopefully if you notice it or whatever, you can decide if this is like a make or break for you if you think this is important enough to not play the comp. When you have low levels Enforcers, you have less wanted units. The wanted unit basically makes or breaks the fight a lot of the time. What's the point of playing towards Enforcer if you're not getting the wanted kills that give the attack speed? Just for a little bit of damage amp and a little bit of shielding, yes, that's quite good. Yes, these units are fine and you can play around them, but a lot of times you want to get the wanted kill. If you ever play Enforcer, you will notice as soon as one of the enemy units dies and one of the wanted enemies dies, the whole fight just speeds up, all your units become demons, and you instantly win. The way Enforcer works a lot of time is if you get the kill, the fight ends in 10 seconds. If you don't get the kill, it's going to overtime and then like your whole board's dead and you lose the fight. That's typically how Enforcer, if you're playing deep into Enforcer, that's typically how it works. Early game, you have the problem with low Enforcer. The wanted enemy, it's hard to predict and it's hard to manage around, especially when there's a lot of people still alive in the board. Here I put a small example just to show you. Let's say you're playing 2 Enforcer, you're playing around Maddie and Step, and you're thinking, maybe I'll play around Enforcer, I'll try and tempo my early game, I'll try and win on stage 2. If you try and prioritize the Enforcer trait, even 2 or 4 Enforcer, because there's so few wanted enemies, it's based on HP. This is an occurrence that happens to me all the time. Right now, who has the most HP on the board? It's actually Lux, right? If you just have a basic opener like this, Lux has more HP because Nashor's Tooth is made with a belt. So this Nashor's Tooth gives the Lux more HP. Now, technically, I think Irelia will have a little bit more HP, but like a lot of times, it's hard to tell whether a frontline unit gets it or a backline unit gets it. So not only do you have to worry about the wanted unit maybe being too insurmountable, like let's say this Irelia had tank items, for example, like something like this, that the Irelia might be really hard to get the wanted proc. Sometimes it's even on a unit that you can't even hit, like a backline unit that's very hard for Maddie to actually get to. Now, Maddie does have a snipe ability that she can hit the backline, so of course, like, there's an argument that she can kill the Lux anyways. But what I'm trying to say is that a lot of times with Enforcer, especially at the lower wanted levels where you don't have that many wanted units, so either 2 Enforcer or 4 Enforcer, what happens is sometimes it's on an inopportune unit, so you never get the wanted kill during the fight, and then you don't get the attack speed. Without the attack speed, the trait doesn't do that much, especially at these low 2 and 4 Enforcer stacks. Like if you play it like your early game, like your stage 2 and your stage 3, it's very hard to actually make your board consistent and strong a lot of the time. Now, there are stronger variations, of course, but that's why part of the reason why I always say I want to play with an emblem is because I want to get to 4 Enforcer as early as possible. If I'm deciding to dedicate myself to playing Enforcer, for example, and I'm taking an Enforcer emblem, I don't even want to take an Enforcer emblem unless it gives me 4 Enforcer. Because if I have 4 Enforcer, it makes it so that there's multiple wanted units, so I'm always getting at least 1 attack speed proc, and then my board becomes very strong very fast. That's just part of the trait. Now, you'll notice a lot of times, I'm sure if you play Enforcer, watch the fights. Watch them closely. You'll see a lot of the fights that you lose are the ones where you're not killing the wanted unit fast enough. Your frontline or your damage dealers die, and you still haven't killed a wanted unit. By the time you kill the wanted unit, it's too late, and then you lose the fight. That's the first problem. I observed this many, many times. I observe it when in my gameplay. I observe it in other people in my lobby's gameplay. And something that's very important. The wanted units, you almost have to prioritize. You have to scout really hard. You have to position your units in such a way to kill a wanted unit, because that attack speed is what makes the board pop. It's what really, really makes it pop. It's very important. Now, let's just talk about the Enforcer trait in general. So, as I was mentioning before, we're just going to look at it in terms of raw stats. I'm not much confidence in this comp because of what my own experience is, but I also make sure not to just be that guy that says, trust me, bro. Whenever I say something is good or bad, I try to also look in the broader scheme of things. I look at other players, I look at better players than me, I look at some worse players than me, I look at stats as well. Enforcer is not that good in the stats. 2 Enforcer is just like you just get it in for fun. You're not actually playing the Enforcer trait. If you look at 4 Enforcer, this is Diamond Plus. I'm just filtering for Diamond Plus. We'll go through it more deeply. 4 Enforcer, it averages like less than a 4.5. That usually means that it's pretty bad. If you look at the distribution of ranks, it is bottom skewed. It means that you are having a tougher time with this comp. If you look at it in general, top 4 percentage, pretty low, 43%. It's not 50-50. You want it to be closer to 50-50, because then if you have a good spot for the comp, you're probably going to be in the high roll spot. Here, it's like, even if you have a good spot for the comp, on average, it doesn't do that well. 6 Enforcer, even worse. You would think, oh, maybe 4 Enforcer is like blah, blah, blah. If you're actually playing Enforcer, so 4 Enforcer is still like, maybe you're not actually playing Enforcer. Like, if you look here, there's like a comp with Dr. Mundo. You know what 4 Enforcer Dr. Mundo is? That's like playing Twitch with Caitlyn. Like, you're playing snipers. You're not playing around actual Enforcer. It's like some high roll bullshit, right? If you're actually playing Enforcer, which is usually like 6 Enforcer where it's active, It averages like even worse. It averages like a 5. You have like a 40% chance of win. Look at this shit. It's so bad. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I understand that, like, you know, I woke up this morning, there's a bunch of Twitter posts saying that Enforcer is broken and like this is how you play it, and there's all these guides, and I'm like, guys, like I feel like we're baiting some people that just haven't like tried the comp out. Like, this comp is very high roll. Now you'll look 6 Enforcer, it averages really bad. If you look at the comp, as soon as you hit a Caitlyn, it averages pretty good. This comp is purely around Caitlyn a lot of the times. You have to high roll your way into a Caitlyn, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But on average, it doesn't do that well. Now, if you go in lower levels of gameplay, like let's say Plat Plus, you'll see that it does a little bit better. But it's still not that good, right? A lot of times, it's just a matter of how much people are punishing you. This comp really needs to make it to level 9 to find legendaries. If you can find the legendaries, like if you can find 5-cost units to supplement your board, then Enforcer is very strong. Trust me, I understand. Yes, it is very strong if you have a bunch of 5-cost. Caitlyn is Kate Win, 100%. I will repeat that many times because I came up with it. I thought it was really funny. But I'm going to say that many times in this presentation, right? It is very strong. And you know what's even stronger? 8 Enforcer. 8 Enforcer is broken. If you can hit 8 Enforcer is with an emblem. That's why I say a lot of times I like to play with an emblem. If you can hit an emblem with this comp, you are so strong. It is one of the strongest traits in the game. Look at this. Look at this graph. You have the highest likelihood of going first? Like, what? Like averages a 20% win rate? It is very strong. Obviously, the stats are skewed because 8 Enforcer means you either have 2 emblems or you found a Caitlyn, because you can't play it with, there's only 7 Enforcer units. But what I would like to talk about a lot in this presentation is 6 Enforcer. It's very hard, and we'll talk about those as well. So, let's go through the Enforcer units now. Little break here. Enforcer units. Actually, I should go back to this. So that I kind of identified the problem. We'll go through late game boards now. And now let's go back. So let's talk about the Enforcer units, right? Enforcers, they don't have many inter-team synergy, except for Maddie and Caitlyn. It's very good around Caitlyn because you get Sniper in for free. So Maddie is a nice early game unit that you can hold on to. And then late game, she gives you really good value for playing her on your board, because even though she's a 1-cost, she gives you Sniper. So Caitlyn gets her free Sniper in. Caitlyn, with any level of Enforcer, is broken. Caitlyn is so strong. If you give her a bunch of damage amp and attack speed, this Caitlyn will delete the entire board. It doesn't matter if it's Caitlyn 1, a Caitlyn 2, a whatever. Caitlyn with Enforcer is really strong. 6 Enforcer, 8 Enforcer, I don't care which one it is. This Caitlyn unit is really strong. The same way she's really strong with something like 6 Sniper or 4 Sniper. Whenever you give her a bunch of stats where she can actually just one-shot units, she just goes around and deletes everybody. So Caitlyn is very strong. The other units don't fit in very nicely, but typically you're playing around Vi. If you look at all these units, they are flexible that you can intertwine different traits with them, but a lot of times it's more efficient to just play a different trait altogether. For example, when you're playing TF, usually you're playing like Quick Strikers. When you're playing Lores, he's usually in a full Sentinel setup. If you're playing Vi, it's usually in a Pit Fighter setup, or you're playing her with Emissary. And I digress, right? Camille, there's a whole reroll line with Camille being broken, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about like Ambusher reroll. We're talking strictly about playing towards as many Enforcer units as possible on your board. Typically, the board looks like this. Now, this is with a emblem. So I'm going to show you some boards with emblems. I'm going to show you some boards without emblems. I'm going to explain the differences and what's good and what's bad about them. So in this version, what we're trying to do is we're trying to play around a dual carry in the form of Ambessa and Caitlyn. Now, I have it as 8 Enforcer right here because eventually you want to play a Caitlyn. Now, you could find a Caitlyn. That's totally fine. If you find a Caitlyn, you hit 8 Enforcer. This board as is on level 8. If you have a Caitlyn, Ambessa with Enforcer emblem and Vi, you are... It's insane how strong it is, because basically Ambessa just gets a bunch of attack speed, and she also has the bonus with TF, where TF gives her Quick Striker. Ambessa as well also makes your board tanky. Tankiness is a big problem with this board because your board is mostly shit units. Vi is really strong and she's good in the front line. However, she's not that tanky. You don't have any frontline traits in, right? You have Loris here, but you don't have Sentinel in. You have Steb here, but you don't have Bruiser in. You have Camille here, but what does she do without any items, without ambush, or without anything? She's just like dead space, right? Maddie is just for sniper synergy, but she's not helping out your front line. TF kind of helps a little bit because he has a little bit of healing, but that's not that big. Ambessa ties the board together really nicely because not only is she Quick Striker, she makes great use out of the Enforcer emblem. She gets a bunch of damage amp as well as getting a bunch of attack speed from killing the wanted units. It also synergizes really well to play dual melee carries because you just have 2 units to just go to town. Ambessa works as not only a frontline unit, but her emissary bonus also gives your whole team a little bit of armor and MR, right? If you read Ambessa's bonus, she gives you 2 armor and MR for each opponent defeated. So if you play an Ambessa on this board, it kind of ties the board a little bit together and solves some of your frontline issues. Vi, your items are very flexible. You can make, like how I showed here, like a tanky crit build where you put IE and Hodge on her. You can also go for full tank. Sometimes you play like double Starex. You can play Titans. She's really flexible with a lot of melee items. A lot of times I also see, and I've tried it myself and I really like it, putting Protector's Vow on Vi. So I don't think this is like necessarily the game breaking thing, but a lot of damage that Vi does and a lot of her ability is like a lot of her ability cast is what makes up like her damage as well as like her utility, because she does like this huge stun where she just like removes a unit from the game and then just like slams them down and does all that cool stuff. So if you get her to cast a lot earlier, a lot of times it can sway the fight really well. So Protector's Vow, that gives her starting mana as well as gives her like a little bit of like a health shield, right? It helps her to live a lot longer, which makes her very strong in these type of setups. So this is a board that is what you typically aim for if you have an Enforcer emblem. Something like this, you can play it a lot more flexibly, of course. Like you can drop Ambessa and you can play a Pit Fighter for Vi. You can play a Sentinel for Loris. You can play a Bruiser. But a lot of times, if you're hitting an Enforcer, you have to find a Caitlyn. And these are fights where if they'll last like 10 seconds. The fight will just be over. It'll be very strong. If you don't have an Enforcer emblem, your board starts to fall apart really fast. Now, you could play extra synergies to kind of make things work, but if you're playing around Ambessa to give you the armor and MR, a lot of times you're trying to find some sort of frontline stability. If you look at this board, it does not spark joy. It looks very weak. The reason it looks very weak is because like there's nothing really synergizing in terms of frontline backline, right? Because you're playing around Vi and Ambessa, you're really dependent on these two doing everything. They have to tank everything and they have to do all of the damage. It makes it very awkward, and especially with 6 Enforcer isn't the same as 8 Enforcer. It like the jump from 6 to 8, right? If you read the amount of damage amp, right? 2 is 12, 4 is 20%, right? Sorry, we're looking at the damage amp numbers, right? 2 Enforcer is 12% damage amp. 4 Enforcer is 20% damage amp, so it's plus 8, right? So you go from having plus 12 for activating the trait to plus 8, which isn't that much. Then you get plus 13 for 6 Enforcer because it's 20 to 33, so plus 13 damage amp is pretty good. But then from 6 to 8 Enforcer, you get to 50% damage amp. It is a massive amount, right? You jump from 33 to 50, that's 27, right? So you lose a lot of your damage straight up. If you've played 8 Enforcer and then you drop to 6 Enforcer, you know it's usually noticeable how much you drop your damage. Additionally, because like your front line, you don't have like you could play Sentinel, but then you lose Pit Fighter. You could play Bruiser, but then you lose something else, right? If you don't have a Caitlyn early, you don't have like a lot of burst damage that can like snipe backline that can really sustain yourself really well. What ends up happening is you're entirely dependent on finding Vi 2 and Ambessa 2, because these are your damage dealers and they're also your frontline units. So it's very hard to be stable with this comp. Because, like I said, you need to kill the wanted unit. If you don't have Vi 2, she might not have enough damage to chew through a frontline unit to kill the wanted unit. Right? Imagine if somebody on the other side of the board has like an Alawi with like double Warmogs. It's like it doesn't, if you don't have Vi 2-star or Ambessa 2-star, you just don't have enough damage. Everybody's gonna die. Your Vi and your Ambessa are trying to drain tank and Omnivamp heal through the enemy damage, and the rest of your board is doing close to nothing. It's very awkward. Just to show you what I mean by this, because you're so dependent, right, on frontline units, with frontline melee units, a lot of times you're very dependent on actually hitting the 2-star. This is a TFT calculator that you can use or check out sometime. I don't usually bring this up in the videos, but I just want to point out how high roll it is to find a Vi 2, because you might look at that and just say, oh, easy, I'll just hit a Vi 2. So let's say you're going for a 4-cost unit, which is Vi, and you're rolling on level 8, right? Number of the copies out, let's say you're uncontested, there's 0 copies out. Number of units of the same cost already out. Let's say that every person in the board has at least 2 copies of units that you're looking for. Or 2 copies of units, like 4 cost units is what I'm saying. So there's 7 other people. Let's say there's, I don't know, 15 units that are gone. There's 15 4 costs that have been bought already. If you look at this, the amount of gold that you want to roll down. Let's say you're rolling on level 8. A good number that I say is that you want to roll on level 8 with around 50 gold. Let's put 50 gold in. 50 gold. To find 1 copy of a desired 4 cost is usually like a 93% chance. That's why a lot of times it's like, hey, if you're playing a comp and it's uncontested, roll 50 gold on level 8, you're almost guaranteed to hit. A lot of it's because of like math like this. Now, I'm not sure exactly if these numbers are 100% right, but they're like roughly, we can assume they're roughly right. Like, it makes sense to what I've learned over the years, right? Over the year, I guess. I haven't played for more than like a year and a half. Two copies of a unit is pretty good. Finding 3 copies of any unit is not very likely. It is pretty unlikely. It's not low roll, or it's high roll to actually hit 3 copies of the unit. And this is uncontested, by the way. These numbers drop dramatically if somebody else is playing Vi. If there's 3 Vi's gone from the pool, you have less than a 30% chance. You have a 21% chance of finding 3 copies of Vi with only 50 gold. So then you have to spend so much gold on level 8. Look at this. By the time we bring this up to a 50% chance, we're rolling 86 gold on level 8. 86 gold to get a 50-50 of whether or not you hit Vi 2. This comp does not spark joy to me. We haven't even talked about Mbessa yet. Like, we're talking about just upgrading one of the units, which is like really important. We're not even talking about Mbessa yet, right? And the problem is, without a 2-star, a lot of times you don't have the damage and you don't have the tankiness. And because you're playing a melee unit and the rest of your board is all these low-cost units, it's very awkward to play this. That being said, this board does cap very high. You could play, you know, for example, something like this. This is something that comes out a lot. All the people are like, oh yeah, I saw this cool board, and it was like vertical enforcer, and it was so strong. It's like, look at this board though. You have to make it to level 9 first of all. This is 6 enforcer. This board will win pretty much any lobby. I'm not saying it's not strong. This board will win any lobby easily. But like, if you look at it, you're playing a bunch of 5 costs, right? So now we solved the frontline problem because we leveled so that we can play Sentinels. We have Sentinel in, we have Pit Fighter in for our Vi. We can still play around the Mbessa, which is really strong. We get to Caitlyn, which Caitlyn just increased our damage dramatically because Caitlyn's going to do probably more damage than anybody else on the board. And now we have like an actual board here. The problem is this board requires a lot of 5 costs, and that's what makes the Enforcer really strong. Because if you can hit the 5 costs, you can win very, very convincingly. It is so strong. However, you also have to note, all this time, there's a big elephant in the room. We're talking about Vi and Mbessa. Guess what else needs Vi and Mbessa? Emissaries! Emissary is so much more popular than Enforcers. There are so many times where I'm trying to play Enforcer and all the Mbessas are gone and all the Vi's are gone because this works with the Emissary video. I made a video on Emissary yesterday, and I'm sure most of you, like maybe not most of you, but I'm sure a lot of you have watched that one. It is very strong. A lot of people play around Emissary, so Vi isn't even like a niche uncontested unit. She's not like somebody that you just don't, that nobody buys, that you'll hit for free. She's not like Echo or like some of these other 4 costs. She is actually somebody that relatively in the current meta is somebody that's bought a lot. So it's pretty awkward to play around Enforcers. That being said, if you want to cap out your board really high, typically you cap your board like this. Now, what can you do in your mid game? We're going to talk about this board because it's 6 Enforcer without an emblem. I already talked about the other stuff, but this applies to the other boards that I showed you. Now it's going to be just me tutorialing. I just want to explain Enforcer in general. A lot of times when you're playing this board, you're typically going to play mana as well as other items on TF. You're going to play your melee items on Vi and also on Mbessa in your mid game, right? On your level 8, a lot of times you're okay. So or a lot of times on level 8, you're just playing like less of the synergies like I showed you before. Eventually, if you hit a Caitlyn, you then transfer your mana items from TF onto Caitlyn. We talked about this in the item guides that I made. Whenever you hit 5 cost units, a lot of times it's better to transfer those items onto the 5 cost units. For example, if you have items on Mbessa, a lot of times you might want to transfer those onto a Savika later, which would be very strong. Vi is very powerful, and Savika is very powerful with Pit Fighter. You solve your frontline issues because Rumble is very tanky, and even if you don't have a Savika, you can even play other synergies to give yourself a little bit more tankiness, like Scrap. A good example is you can hold on to a Gangplank, you put in Gangplank, now you get, not only do you get Pit Fighter in for the Vi, you also get Scrap. So there's a lot of flexibility and power with this board, but it requires you to make it to level 9. Making it to level 9 means that you have to be strong on level 8, which means you have to high roll level 8, which we already talked about. A lot of times early game, remember I was talking about your early game, sometimes your early game is a bit dodgy, especially if you're playing around Enforcer, so you have to basically be high rolling. With this comp, if you're very strong and you can make it to level 9, you are in a very good spot. If you can't make it to level 9, then you're kind of hoping that you hit a Caitlyn on level 8, and then you could play something along the lines of this or this, right? Whether you have an emblem or not. If you don't have an emblem, even 6 Enforcer, like I said, as soon as you hit Caitlyn, you're back, right? As soon as you hit Caitlyn, you just drop any of the useless units. So just drop Camille, for example. You play Caitlyn, GG. The game's over. You win, right? but it's very temperamental. That's what I mean. If you want to guarantee success with this comp, you want to be strong early, you want to have lots of gold, you want to be high rolling, so you want to actually hit your upgraded units ahead of tempo, and you want to be able to fast 9. You cannot just say that you're fast 9ing at the start of the game. However, there are certain spots that this is really good. For example, if you have an emblem, Mbessa encounter where you get the trainer sentinel thing, and if the trainer sentinel has enforcer emblem, you're pretty good, right? There's lots of ways that you can play around the board. Let's talk about early game boards as well. Let's say you really want to play enforcers. I'm not trying to deter everybody. Of course, experiment, have your own experiences, play the game, have fun. All of that's totally fine. I've played enforcer a lot, right? I'm just giving you my honest opinion and trying to explain like what I think is good and what I think is bad with the comp and how you have to play it, right? This comp is very strong if you're strong early and if you're high rolling. So sometimes playing around an early family opener is just a general strong early game. And it also leans itself really nicely into melee items. So a lot of times you can put melee items on a what's her name, Violet, and then afterwards you can put other items like mana items onto a powder. And if you have the mana items on powder and you have the damage items on Violet, then you can slowly transition this into an enforcer board if you so choose, or if you hit those enforcer units and you kind of high roll into it. So for example, eventually you can drop and you can start playing vertical pit fighter. If you find an early Mbessa, you can then play around Mbessa. Additionally, you can just play starting to play some enforcer units that are pretty strong. So something like a Loris is a really good tank, especially in mid game. So if you want to pivot into sentinels, you can do that. But a lot of times an opener like this is really nice if you have melee items. A more risky opener a lot of times is playing around Maddie. This is something that I always tell beginners. Of course, if you are a very good player, I don't know what very good stands for you guys, right? Decide amongst yourselves. And personally, if you feel really confident and you think that you can just whip out a top 4 no matter what, if you try out hard enough, it's for sure. I don't like playing enforcer from an opener with Maddie. A lot of times when you're playing enforcer with Maddie, you start building items like IE and Last Whisper, right? Where is Last Whisper? Last Whisper, and you make a Shojin, right? What am I doing here, right? What am I doing? What do you guys think I'm doing here? I'm making Caitlyn items, right? It looks like I'm making Caitlyn items. I'm not making Vi items. I'm making Caitlyn items. Why is that bad? Because you might not find a 5 cost. How many games have you played of TFT where you're rolling down on level 9, not even level 8, level 9, and you don't find a copy of a 5 cost? You cannot guarantee a Caitlyn. Any comp where you are saying to yourself, I'm going to play for the Caitlyn, you are just hoping that you're going to get bailed out later. This is called playing for a bailout. That's what this is. This is not called playing TFT in a consistent and reliable way. This is called, I'm just going to hope that I hit Caitlyn. If I hit Caitlyn, then bang, I have Giga Caitlyn items, right? IE works with Enforcer, Enforcer proc, hits, you get this attack speed bonus with the mana gen. She generates a shit ton of mana, gets the cast off, she has damage amp from Enforcer, so with the crit, absolute unit, kills everybody. You instant win if you find a Caitlyn like this. However, what if you don't find a Caitlyn? You're carrying Maddie for the entirety of the game. That's what happens a lot of the time, and that's where you go 8th. If you don't find a Caitlyn, what do you do? If you're not stable on level 8, what do you do? What if everybody else hits on level 8 and you don't? What if you don't hit Vi 2? What if you just hope, you just cross your fingers and hope that you go level 9? These type of openers are very risky. They're very baity. A lot of times they're even worse if you actually have vertical enforcers. So sometimes you'll have a mid game that looks something like this. Let me find another enforcer unit. Camille. You'll have an opener that looks like this, and you'll think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna play Vi Caitlyn dual carry, right? And then you put your melee items here, and you're like, yep, this is gonna work. It's yeah, but what if you don't find a Caitlyn? That's the big problem. What if you don't find a Caitlyn? If you don't find a Caitlyn, then yeah, you can put IE on this, and you can play IE on Vi. There's options, but it's not that good. What I would suggest as an opener is something that looks more like this, right? This is why I really like Enforcer Emblem. A lot of times I've played this opener into Enforcer. This is an opener where I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I'm playing Enforcer. I'm strong as shit. The reason is because I'm playing around Camille for my mid game. You can play Scrap with Powder. You have a good front line. You have a very strong opener. So you're going to win a lot of stage 2 rounds. Camille also deletes tanks. Her whole thing is that she does a huge amount of burst damage. So if you have a Camille opener and you play melee items on Camille, you can decide to play Camille reroll, but it's actually pretty good to play towards Enforcer because you're strong early, right? Especially let's say you high roll and you have a Camille 2 in this spot. If you have a Camille 2 for Enforcer, Get an ambusher, and doesn't even have to be the powder. I'm just putting for scrap because it synergizes with these early units. These are the type of openers where you just absolutely steamroll the lobby. And then you have the potential to go 9 because you win stage 2, you win stage 3, and then when you go 9, you have a lot of opportunity to, like, you know, bleed out on stage 4, right? If you don't hit Vi 2, you can still make it to level 9 because you accrued so much of an HP lead in your early game. Something like this is probably going to be a guide later where I talk about this type of gameplay more, like where you should save HP and like stages and HP per stage and type of stuff like that, with respect to like tempoing with comms. But this is what I mean. I wouldn't necessarily play like this. Obviously, like I said, if you're confident and it works for you and you're not getting punished for playing like this and you're hitting Caitlyn every single game, by all means continue to play like this. I have no qualms with you. I have no issue with you. I'm just making a guide for beginners, and I'm saying, like, for a beginner, I would try and avoid the comp unless I have something that looks like this, right? Not exactly this, but like along the same air of like, this is how strong I want to be in my early game to make sure that I'm actually proccing my enforcer and I'm actually being strong for my late game. Now, conditions for success. I didn't put it on multiple slides and I have the wrong emblem here. I'm sorry. It should be enforcer emblem. Error in the slides, but whatever. What you want is an enforcer emblem, not an academy emblem. You want to have a very strong opener. You want early enforcer units, as I was saying before. You want to hit 4 and 6 enforcer as early as possible because the 2 enforcer has a really awkward problem where you don't get the enforcer proc. So if you're itemizing towards your enforcer units, it makes your early game a little bit more difficult. So I would definitely recommend trying to play it when you have 4 enforcer rather than 2 enforcer on stage 2. You need good econ because you want to be able to fast 9. And you want to be uncontested ideally, right? If other people are playing towards emissary, you might not be able to hit Vi 2. You might not be able to hit Mbessa 2. If you're not playing around Mbessa, that's fine. You can choose not to play Mbessa, but Vi is the real killer. If you don't hit Vi, your team falls apart very fast because then you're just relying on Loris and Steb, and you don't have a damage dealer because Vi's in your front line. So if you don't hit Vi upgraded, she dies too quickly a lot of the time. If your Vi's dying too quickly, then everything just crumbles. It crumbles way too fast, right? Like, imagine if you remove Vi from this board. Who's carrying? TF? It's like, yeah, a lot of times you have TF items, but you put stuff like, you know, Shojin, Morello. Maybe like if you have AP items, you can carry TF, right? Like a TF 2 star or even a TF 3 star if you're like stuck on level 8. TF is a strong unit. I'm not saying he's not. What I'm saying is, like, if you're making AP items and your immediate knee-jerk reaction is, I'm going to play TF Enforcer, it's like, like, you know, maybe play Heimer, Silco. Right? That's like a worst case scenario. That's like things are going bad and you're trying to find a bailout again. And I'm not a bailout player. And then lots of items are generally good because you can itemize multiple units. All your enforcer units do really well. Also, enforcer emblem is very strong because there's many units that can use enforcer emblem very, very easily. And additionally, you want to be high roll, right? If you are already, this is a comp where you can convert into a first very easily. So if you're already in a spot where you're hitting Vi 2, you have enforcers. Even with 6 enforcer, you have Vi 2, Mbessa 2, you go straight to 9, Caitlyn 2, you win the game. It is so easy to convert that to a win. It is so powerful, especially if you're 8 enforcer. If you're 8 enforcer, Caitlyn 2, bang, the game's done. It's actually done. Like, I watched somebody today have a Lowy 3 and lose to a Caitlyn 2 with 6 enforcer. Like, a Lowy 3, Caitlyn 2, they lost. It happened on stream today. I was also playing in Force that lobby, so I was bitching because that guy was contesting me. But either way, I'm just saying, it is absurdly strong. So I always err, but you have to err on the side of caution because it is high roll. It is very difficult. Remember, the main takeaway, if you have to remember anything, it's Kate win or 8th win, okay? I spent a lot of time thinking this up, so please laugh and please, like, give me a thumbs up for that one at least. Please don't unsubscribe. I won't do jokes like this in the future if it's bad. Now, example gameplay. So, just to show that I was a day one, this is like last patch, like a month ago. I was playing 8 Enforcer. I do play Enforcer when I have the chance to, right? If you look at my opener, what does my opener look like? It's the exact opener that I showed you guys. I took it from myself, right? Like, I plagiarized my own video. But look at this opener. I have melee items. I have Enforcer Emblem. I have a Loris 2. This was back when Enforcer Emblem gave you a Loris. In the past, let's just go here, like, set info augments, right? This got nerfed, right? So Enforcers used to be really bad because Vi was really shit. So nobody would ever wanted to play Enforcer because Vi was shit. So then Enforcer Crest used to give you a Loris, which is really broken because then you get Enforcer Emblem plus a Loris. Compared to, like, any other emblem. Like Conqueror Crest. It gives you a Conqueror emblem and a Rel. Then go to Enforcer. It doesn't give you the Loris, right? It was like, they try to like, I don't know why they took out the Loris. I think it was because like 8 Enforcer is so powerful that if it gave you a Loris and you just steamrolled the lobby, I think especially in like lower elos where people aren't punishing the gameplay as aggressively, people were just winning for free with Enforcer emblem. So they removed it because they buffed Vi. But Enforcer kind of got a stray bullet where now it's like a lot worse off because you don't like compared to every other emblem. Look, Firelight Crest, you get a Zeri. Like every other emblem gives you a unit. This crest doesn't give you a unit. They just decided, nah. Dominator Crest gets a Blitzcrank. Enforcer Crest, nothing. Like, I don't get it. But, you know, that's just me. Anyways, if you look at this opener, I am very strong. I talk about this. This is an old VOD, so it's not going to be up to date. So I don't recommend you necessarily have to watch this one for gameplay. I'm just using it because it's the most convenient, like, you know, thing for me to just pick up and show you guys. But if you look at it, let's show you here, for example, right? I'm 4 Enforcer. I wish I had a little bit of a cut. Look at this fight, right? There is one wanted. The wanted crests are the things that are like the little blue like targets that are on the unit. And there's a wanted in the back line as well. So this is what happens a lot of the time. Sometimes there's a wanted in the back line because this guy has a Renata 2 in his back line. So if you didn't have 4 Enforcer in, I basically wouldn't get the attack speed proc. Watch, as soon as this guy dies, you're going to see my units are going to go absolutely stir crazy. Right? So watch, this guy dies, I'm going to get a huge boost of attack speed. Watch, boom. You see how this Camille already, everybody's moving noticeably faster. This is what I mean by this comp is very like, if you get the Enforcer proc, the fight just ends. If you don't get the Enforcer proc, sometimes you just sit there and you just spur your wheels and you don't win anything. When I'm playing this comp, I'm playing it right, or sorry, in this VOD when I'm playing this comp, I just kind of try and tempo as hard as possible. I try to continue making melee items and win streaking, so I'm going to slam items that make sense with my board. I'm not going to try and hold on to items too much. Here, I'm itemizing. The only reason I have Enforcer and this random component on the Trundle is because Trundle is scrap, so I'm getting scrap value. But I'm going to probably itemize maybe like I can imagine myself moving items onto Loris at one point in this mid game, just to be a little bit stronger. But as you can see, I just play towards Enforcer. I lose a couple rounds in the mid game. I want to see if maybe I can show you one of the rounds I lose. This round is just like, okay, so this round, as you can see, I haven't killed any of the Enforcer procs yet. By the time I kill an Enforcer unit, most of my board is dead, right? I didn't kill a wanted unit because this guy was too tanky and this guy over here was just too much for me to deal with. So it took me forever to actually get the Enforcer kill. So I ended up losing this fight. This guy's also playing Enforcer, which is kind of funny. Back in the day when everybody was trying to play Enforcer. Nowadays, it's a little bit more niche. But anyways, I want to show you towards my late game and my mid game. Something that's really cool about Enforcer as well is that it leans itself really heavily into some of these other traits. Like, what are the sister traits? Like Martial Law, right? Martial Law, you get an Investa and a Caitlyn, right? What's the other one? I don't know what it is. The one where it gives you like Sisters isn't that good. Betrayal. You get Maddie and Mbessa. Like these ones are really good with playing vertical Enforcer because it gives you the units and it powers them up. So like Enforcer leans itself really heavily into all of those paired traits because a lot of them give you a Vi and powers it up. So you can also take it with those and play around Enforcer is pretty good. Eventually I hit Mbessa. I try and stabilize. I have some AP items. As you can see, I'm trying to set myself up such that I can go 9. I'm not very stable. I'm losing a lot of rounds here, right? I'm on a 4 loss streak because I have just Vi and Caitlyn. So from a win streak where I started the game off with 90 HP, I'm now losing almost every single round because I just can't itemize or play around these units. And this is with an Enforcer emblem. So this is 6 Enforcer with an Enforcer emblem. I'm trying my best, right? I'm making a front line here. I know I have 3 Sentinel, but I'm trying my best to like make things work out. I need to put in the TF. I didn't put the TF in, but either way, this is like old gameplay, so like, you know, I'm a bit inept when it comes to that. Eventually, I hit 2 Enforcer emblems, and then once I hit 8 Enforcer, you'll see how this fight goes. It'll just be like an absolute deletion as soon as I kill a unit. Right, I kill this first unit, my whole team gains attack speed. Right, then I kill another unit, my whole team starts popping off because you just keep killing. Very feast or famine. This is Vi with a family crest, so it's very, very strong. But as you can see, look at this Mbessa. She's absolutely deleting everybody. It's broken, right? I just beat Vi 3. Welcome to the family, or sorry, welcome to the playground. 4 family with a family crest. That's what I mean by it's very easy to first it. The 8 Enforcer makes it a lot more stable. Here I have 2 Enforcer emblems, so I didn't find a Caitlyn. Eventually I find Mbessa 2. I can then streak myself, up until I make it to level 9. Once I find a Caitlyn, I can transfer some of the mana gen and other items onto Caitlyn. Here I'm level 9. I don't find a Caitlyn right away. I'm holding on to all these stubs for some reason, but I don't think stub 3 really matters that much. Right, once I find a Caitlyn, I can then play around Caitlyn. It ends up being like a top 4. I still lose to some other high roll boards. But you get your mana item on Caitlyn, and then you're really strong. That's typically how this game goes. I know I skimmed through it. This is old gameplay, so, don't expect the best gameplay, right? This was like when I was first learning the set a couple months, or at least a month ago. It's one of the earlier videos I made on this channel. But either way, that's the way that you normally play Enforcer. Now, of course, you could also drop a lot of these units for 5-cost units. Right, Savika Rumble, similar to like these boards that I was talking about, because these are like instant win boards, right? These are like instant win boards, right? If you get a bunch of 5 costs upgraded, you just win the game for free. It's very strong. So obviously you can aim towards these. But anyways, that's a little bit of example gameplay. We're ending the video now. Make sure to like and subscribe. It was a little bit longer because I spent a lot of time talking about like the early game and some of the issues, so it was a little bit extra in this video. Hopefully I've convinced you of when to play Enforcers. I'm not saying never play Enforcers. What I'm saying is play towards Enforcers when you know that you have a good spot for it, right? You have to make sure that you're strong early to save HP and make gold so that you can actually hit your units on level 8, and then you can actually make it to level 9. I think the comp right now is starting to become really popular and it's starting to become really overplayed. And it's not necessarily reflecting that in the stats. The stats aren't improving for the comp. It's not like people figured some secret tech out and they're suddenly playing Enforcer and doing really well. Enforcer has always been strong. It got nerfed. They literally nerfed Enforcer Emblem into this patch. Right? They buffed Vi, so that's probably why they nerfed Enforcer Emblem. But it was strong before. It's still strong now. You just have to have a good spot for it. It's not, even though it's one of the, like the obvious, like everybody's an Enforcer, so it feels like you can always play it type of trait. It is a sometimes food, unfortunately. Maybe things will change in future updates, of course. If you come back to this video, in the future, welcome from the future. But, of course, just be careful. That's what I always want to stress. So, that's this guide. Tomorrow, either tomorrow or the day after, I'm going to be doing a Black Rose guide. And I'm going to be taking a break from these type of guides. I'm going to be doing some other guides about ranking up. Because I think a rank up guide would be really fun. I usually do it when I hit master, so I'm a little bit behind, but as soon as I hit master, I usually do a rank up guide of here's my experience of how I made it to master, and this is what you can do to get to master. So I'm going to do that guide. If you want to see other guides like this where I'm talking about a particular trait and I'm going through it, make sure to comment below which one you want me to do. Right now on the short list is Black Rose Dominators next, which I'm going to do either tomorrow or the day after. And if you have one that you want to see, make sure to let me know and I'll put it like higher up on the list because I'm going to go through all of the traits and give my opinions and stuff like that. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye bye.